I was just going to ask a question of, besides writing papers and classes, what else do philosophers do with their education?
Oh, once they get their degrees.
Besides,
It could be a chaplain. We had a friend, I think she got her bachelor's in psychology from Davis. You can't do anything with a bachelor's degree these days, especially. So, she had part-time work here and there. She became a house cleaner for a while. And we encouraged her to go and get her master's in humanities, and she did. She taught for us for a few years, and then she's now teaching at a few colleges, and now she's a chaplain too. So you could help the deaf and dying and their families. You could become a lawyer, I suppose. You could be a counselor of sorts. Become a Catholic. Sometimes you walk into whatever with a certain intention. Like, I want to do philosophy because I want to be a lawyer. Or I want to do religious studies because I want to be a chaplain. Or I want to get married because this guy has a lot of money. And that's your intention. And they're all good, even if you want to marry for money, because money is important. And then you say, once this guy dies, I will inherit everything that he has, and I'll find love, and I'll marry for love. Okay. And then you walk into that world with that specific intention, and something strange happens to you, where you realize that you don't really want to be a lawyer. And it is true that you got married for money, but all of a sudden you see qualities in this man that you rarely found in other people. And so little by little you find yourself gravitating towards a set of emotions you didn't expect yourself to. We had a friend in Iran, and every time we talked to her, she would say, I just want to come to America. Iran is awful. There is no hope. You can't go to school because it's so expensive. You can't buy a pound of meat. You have to stand in line for a loaf of bread or a dozen eggs. Everything is just like a struggle. And so she was like 26, 27, very attractive. This man who was a doctor went to Iran, and he was 48. And she had mentioned to us that she'll do anything to exit the country. And so this guy goes there, they look at each other. She says yes to the marriage proposal. What he doesn't know is that she has a boyfriend back home. And what she had mentioned to her boyfriend is, I'll get married to this guy. Once I get my citizenship, I will divorce him. I will apply for you to get your green card. Then you'll come here and then we'll get married. And that was the intention. So she comes here, and of course, you're married, you live together, and little by little, she comes to realize he's a really, really nice guy. Very mature, very grounded. They have great conversations, I suppose, great bedroom events. And there comes a point where one day she says she wakes up and she comes to realize that she really, really loves him. And of course, all the while she was contacting her boyfriend back home, like once or twice a week. They would talk for hours. On this particular occasion, when she discovers that she really likes this man, she calls him and says, don't ever call me again. You and I don't have a past, we don't have much of a future, and that's it. And so when I did my education, my intention wasn't to come and teach. That was the last thing on my mind, because first, I didn't like teaching. Second, I was very, very reserved. I still am very shy. And public speaking and just being in public is not something that I enjoy. Even now, when we have guests, sometimes I try to stay in the back room as long as I possibly can before my wife or my kids come and fetch me. So I don't like to hang out with people. And so you realize that, you know, you don't want to be at the car wash for the rest of your life. So you give this a shot. Now, it may happen that you come to the class, you open your mouth, and you realize, as an instructor, you really just stink. You know, the Persian Sufi poet Rumi often would say, sometimes people open their mouth and ice comes out. Like even things that are alive become frozen and they die. Sometimes you open your mouth and fire comes out, that even things that have no life in them, you bring them to life. So for many of us, really, when you walk into things, you have no idea if you're going to be ice or you're going to be fire. If you're going to take life, or you're going to give life. And, you know, I walk in the classroom, open my mouth. It wasn't bad, you know. It's not great, but it's not bad. And then in the past, like 30 years of teaching, there have been many opportunities where my vice president or the president comes to me and says, listen, you know, whenever you grow tired of teaching, maybe you want to be into, you know, maybe you can be a dean. I don't know if you know what that means, but you lock yourself in a room and you do a lot of paperwork and you have administrative meetings where you talk about bathrooms and scheduling and bathrooms and the paint of the walls and then bathrooms. So you really have to have a very thick skin to have conversations about ridiculous things, you know. Now, my intention has been to just be in the classroom. Now, it may be that, as I get a bit older, my intention may change. You know, so the point I'm trying to make is sometimes you walk into things assuming that you're going to be A, but after some exposure, you realize you really want to be B. And then you break the news to your people, and they say, why? Consider for a moment what happened to Martin Luther around the 15th century. His father is a lawyer, I think. He wants his son to be a lawyer. And there is an event that happens to him. You know, he's walking back from school and lightning strikes. And it's a thunderstorm. It's really, really bad. And one of the nice things about ancient people is that everything for them is a mystery. You know, it's an act of God. You know, if you have cancer, God wills it. If you're happy, God wills it. If you're sad, God wills it. If you're married, God wills it. If you're divorced, God wills it. Everything is about God, which makes life quite magical and mysterious, you know. And at the end, with the moment you wake up, you say, my life is in God's hand. And when you put your head down to go to sleep, you say, I don't know if I'm going to wake up or not, but it's in God's hand. The idea of you willing your life, you guiding your life, it's unheard of. And so he wants to be a lawyer, but this event happens. And all of a sudden, I mean, there's lightning and he's really, really scared. And in the middle of the forest, he just kneels and he cries and he screams and he says, if my life is spared, you know, if God is able to look down and see that my life has certain value, I have some potential as a human being, maybe he can spare my life and guide me to a certain direction. And he says, yes, maybe I'll be a monk, you know. And it's good to be a monk if you're a lawyer. And the reason is, especially if you like rhetoric, debate, that it allows you to see the gaps and holes in your language, in the way you think, in the way you feel about things, in the way you express yourself. You know, you cover yourself. And so he says, you know, if my life is spared, I'll become a monk. He becomes a monk. But he was a lawyer. He knows the function of language. He knows the function of rationality and reason. And though despite he has a volcano, eruption of feelings, you know, every single day, he knows how to put those emotions into rationality. So when it comes time for the Catholic Church to crucify him, and they do it by try him. You know, there's a trial. He has to go through like 5, 10, 15, 20 people. And he checkmates all of them. You know, and the Catholic Church has no power over him in the way of beating him in debates. So what they do is they try to assassinate him, to kill him. And of course, he runs away and he's helped. So, what else can I tell you? Nothing really. So, maybe you want to do philosophy because you like to think. Then you may come to realize that thinking is a waste of time and people are a waste of time. You want to come to you want to be an administrator. And you'll be a dean or a VP or a P or a CP. That's like a chancellor something. And maybe you'll be very good. And maybe not, you realize nothing works out for you, you just jump from a bridge. So, yeah. Your hand was up.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say also another use might be like going into a funeral like service or like
I mean, if you like dead people, they make decent money, 60, 70, 80,000. If you're in the business of like burying politicians, it jumps to about 275,000 with healthcare and all that stuff. You could be a freedom fighter, carrying your soldiers or your followers to their grave, and then a statue will be built for you after you yourself are dead. And people will stick bubble gum and all sorts of things. You're still young. So just go with the flow. But be smart. Life is tough. I mean, given the political climate, if you were like a 25-year-old, a person of color, male, certain parts of Oakland, you should just never go. Because it's ice, cold, and they could handcuff you and send you to El Salvador. Food for people who are there, where you have to do a lot of sexual favors to survive. That's politics. You have to know it, you have to understand it, you have to be frightened, and that fear protects you. So that's life. Be smart. Did you guys see Matthew? Jesus Christ, reborn. Kasara, did you see him? Turn around. What do you think? 1 to 10.
10.
Now that's extra credit for you, right there. Oh my God. I can't focus. You're distracting me. I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Oh, you guys. Yeah.
In one of your lectures, you mentioned like the desert life and how it sort of strips you of a lot of the effortless pleasure of life. But is there a difference between being forced in a desert life and or like choosing desert life yourself? Does that have a different effect on you, whether it was against your will to go do it or you chose to self-exile, I guess? What effect does that have?
I'll give you a scenario. I'll romanticize it a little bit for you. Imagine you like someone in this class. In fact, the two of you are in a relationship. Let's just say you and, Casera. Do you mind? Do you mind? Thank you. You're both so generous with your lives. So, let me first tell you what your life consists of. You make dinner plans. That's no desert. You go to IKEA to buy a bed. No desert. You go to Costco to buy mattress, dressers, lamps. You make dinner together. You hold hands and you walk around the lake. You sit and watch movies together. You live in the city. Your life is full. Your life is rich. It has meaning. It has purpose. There comes a point where you become a Buddhist without really knowing what even Buddhism is, which is eventually there comes a point in all of our life experiences where whatever it is that you have experienced, there comes a dead-end road where the experience no longer gives you pleasure. The experience no longer gives you joy. You're just doing it. It's a habit. It's routine. It's groundhog. Okay? Now, you still live in that city, and it's a wonderful place to be. Ahmed. Hi. حال شما چطوره؟ See, this is what your mom should have done. Enroll you in classes at the age of 5. And so, once in a while, you realize that you have done the same thing with your companion, whose name is Kasera, for so many years that it's no longer as meaningful. It no longer gives you the sense of joy and happiness it once did. But you're comfortable. And you conform. You conform to the way your life is. You used to struggle. She says, you know, Matthew, you never write me poetry anymore. You say, let's just go have pizza. You know. And you look at her and you say, Kasera, you used to give me massages. What the hell happened? You know. And even though there is a good amount of sarcasm in the language, you know, it's humorous, but there is a reality behind all the things that you say. You know, there used to be an element of surprise, an element of joy and happiness, passion, but it's no longer there, you know. But you kind of look the other way. There comes a point where you begin to wake up more and more at 2 in the morning, and then 3, and then 4. It's kind of like what happens to you when you get a little older, you know. I mean, when you're young, you can drink like 20 cups of water from like 9 p.m. and you go to bed at 10:30 and you don't have to get up to pee, right? But once you hit like 50, you know, you look at water. You don't even have to drink it. You look at water and you realize you have to pee like 50 times. And you wake up exhausted because, well, you had to wake up like 50 times throughout the night. And so as your relationship with Kasara, you know, goes on, you realize you become more aware that you're less happy, you're less fulfilled. It feels like home less. And every time you see her, you feel constricted. And you say, I didn't sign up for this. Now, if you happen to be cunning enough, a really, really good politician, if you happen to have a good amount of forgetfulness about you, being able to distract yourself, then there's a good chance that you will try to get rid of these emotions that come upon you, okay? And you will continue with the relationship until you get to be 50, 60, 70, where you're no longer young enough or healthy enough to desire happiness. All you really want is when you go home, someone is there to cook for you. Someone is there to give you your pills. Someone is there to take you to Kaiser, okay? But you're young enough and you're hopeful enough and you're a dreamer where your Kaiser stage is not yet at hand. You know, you still want to, as Emerson would say, or Thoreau, suck the marrow out of life. You know? It's like a brand new music comes out and it just does something to you. So you listen to it 50 times. And then when you listen to it the 51st time, you realize, oh, it's no longer doing to me what it used to do. You know, some music gives you joy. Some music puts you in a melancholic mood where you sit, you mope around, you begin to reflect. You become a bit morbid, but you also become very creative and very inspired. Now, as you begin to reflect on the hopelessness of your situation with Kasera and the fact that you want out and you're waiting to figure out how you could express to her that, you know, listen, I love you, but I just don't want to be with you anymore. Your desert life begins. And by desert life, I mean the following. The memories of the past no longer sustain you. Your plans for the future no longer sustain you. They no longer mean anything to you. And every time you see her, you realize she has nothing to offer you. You go to the back room. You play with your cell phone. You play with your laptop. You sit. You write. And you begin to do a whole host of things on your own. She says, let's have dinner. You say, no, not tonight. Sleep next to me on the sofa tonight. I'll see you tomorrow night. And you realize you're moving yourself more and more distance from her. That becomes your desert life. Okay? Every time you walk home, there is this feeling of dread. Do I really need to see her? Do I really need to talk to her? Every time she says, talk to me, you say, no, I don't want to talk to you. There is nothing to talk to you about. We've talked plenty. Now, one of the nice things about our parents is that they didn't have the disease that most of us today have, which is you don't chase after a ghost the way young people do today. I want to be happy. Let's talk about something that's creative. Let's be inspired. Let's live a creative life. You know, you get married, 2 weeks later, you have children. And then your kids occupy your brain space. You only have 5% space to yourself. And that 5%, the moment you want to use it in any creative way, you're far too exhausted. So you pass out. And before you know it, you're 70. What happened to your life? Your kids. They stole everything. Okay? And the only way that you could be happy with what has been taken from you is when your kids come home and say, Dad, thank you. I understand what it means to be a parent now. Let me take care of you. That's the only reward you'll get. Most of it is a headache. And in this day and age where parents are not there and kids have their own set of issues, it's going to be very, very difficult for kids to come and see their parents. They're usually in a nursing home, stashed somewhere in a corner. Okay. And so the desert, there are a couple of things. There is the sun. There are no shades, which means that all you're thinking about is how miserable you are in this relationship with Kasera. It's relentless. It's burning you inwardly as well as outwardly. You dread going home. You dread looking at her. You dread bringing up images of the relationship. Now, the problem with the desert is that there are no GPSs. There are no signposts. It doesn't say if you take this particular path, it'll lead you to the city or the promised land. And that's one of the things that Moses talked about, not so much the Jews, but Moses. You know, Moses found the promised land. He found it when he witnessed the burning bush. Okay? All he wanted for his people is to find a relatively healthy physical location. That's all. He knew that eventually they're going to be held hostage by another kind of a pharaoh. Okay? So in the desert, there are no promised lands. You have no idea where to go, what to do. The only thing you can hope for is a Lucifer, the morning star, that can come down and somehow you can follow it to the promised land. Without that, you're just lost completely. So what happens in your relationship is, as your memories become irrelevant, as your relationship becomes irrelevant, you find yourself more and more isolated. Your parents give you a pep talk, but you say, don't give me a gospel. I don't really care for your gospel. You know, you're going to feel bad. You're going to feel guilty. You will try whatever you possibly can to get yourself back into the relationship. But what has happened to you now is you have inside you the birth of conscience. Something about you has awakened up. In Arabic, we call it yaqzah. Yaqzah is a sort of awakening. And this particular kind of awakening is really difficult to put back to sleep. Something about you has woken up. You just know to the core of your being that you just don't want to be with her. And yet you are. And you're desperately trying to kind of figure out how to get yourself out. And that's where the lobbying comes in. Now, you don't need lobbyists if you can get things your way easily. You have lobbyists when you realize that the situation is complex, difficult, and there's a lot of pushback. So you need a lot of vultures, serpents, foxes who are proficient in the art of cunningness, deception, to kind of keep twisting your arm until you give. Okay? And so you're going to have a lot of lobbyists in your life, one of them being yourself, saying to you, get back into the relationship. It's okay. Kasara is not really all that bad. Don't be stupid. Don't be a hippie. You guys have created a solid life. Why would you want to get out? And what? Loneliness is out there. What are you going to do? Are you young enough, patient enough to go out there, the dating scene? Who are you going to find? Who are you going to talk to? Okay? And every time the voice of conscience, yaqzeh, comes up and says, get out, the lobbyists come in, make you feel bad, make you feel guilty, push you into an environment you don't really want to be. You have another group of lobbyists, and they will encourage you to get out. No one wills a desert life. For the most part, it happens organically, but you will try to resist it because it is painful. I mean, imagine if the story was actually true and you want to go home and tell Kasara you don't want to be with her. What are you going to do when you see pain on her facial expression? What are you going to do when you see her cry, scream, break the door? What are you going to do? Well, you're going to feel bad. And you're going to give in to those feelings. A desert life means there is nothing. There is the sun and there is the sand. No flower grows, no trees, no water, nothing. You're there by yourself, on your own. And you have to become what they call ramez. Ramez is a baby camel. Goes without sleep, without food, without water. 40 days. And the number is kind of symbolic. Jesus and 40 days in the desert, Moses 40 years, Muhammad 40. So that's why we don't like change. It takes away so many things from us. I mean, I'm sure you reflected a few times as to whether you should get a haircut today, tomorrow, this month, next month, this week, next week. There came a point you said, you know what, screw it. Just going to cut it and see where it goes. But it took some time. We become addicted to whatever. Yeah. Is it, are we, Erica, yes. Yeah, yeah. Detachment? No. You can't do it when you're young. Detachment requires a lot of understanding. Consider it this way. Go home today and open your closet And I'm sure you have jackets, you have shirts, pants, underwear, socks that you haven't worn for many, many, many centuries. Okay? Put them outside for someone to take. And you may come to the conclusion that yes, it is true, I haven't worn this jacket for like 5 years, but maybe next week, maybe next fall. And you realize that even though you haven't used this jacket for centuries, you have emotional attachments. You also have plans for it in the future, a future that has not yet arrived. Now, the only way that you will put out your jacket for someone to take is you look at it and say, you know what? My closet is cluttered. I hate this. You need an opposing force that removes all the memories, all the values created by the memories, all the future plans, and all the values connected to the future plans. You look at it and you say, yes, it could be. Yes, I did have, but I no longer care. Now, if it happens to be the only jacket that you hold, there's a good chance you're going to keep it. If on the other hand you open your closet and there are 50 jackets, you will not have much trouble. So detachment also requires a good amount of privilege. In sense of emotional and intellectual detachment, you need a good amount of privilege that can only come in the form of understanding. You need to understand a lot of things about life so you can have a relatively good death. You have to understand why you've made so many mistakes in your life, so that the last few months of your miserable life before you die is not going to be filled with agony, moans and groans and regrets. You have to understand why people make mistakes. You have to understand that most often we make decisions based on the knowledge and the information given to us. If I knew that my first wife had all the things I really needed, I would have never divorced. If I knew that my parents' home was really my sanctuary, I would have stayed. But what the hell do? You're 18. You live in America, land of dreams, right? You get deceived by these dreams. You leave your parents. You get a job at Starbucks. You drop out of school. Now you're 35. You have no money. You have no savings. You have nothing. Then you call your dad with a good amount of shame. I want to come back home and go back to school. Only at the age of 35 are you able to say, you know what? My independence doesn't mean anything. Freedom doesn't mean anything. Money doesn't mean anything. I want to go back to school. Now you can walk away from your life, your ridiculous life from 18 to 30 with a good amount of detachment. Why? Because you find it meaningless. In the absence of that understanding, no. Someone has to force you. What? Is there someone else?
Does that understanding come on experience?
Always go back to what our good friend used to say, Confucius. We're all hungry for something. Okay. You're hungry for an A, so you use ChatGPT to write your essay. You're hungry to get a job, so you ask your dad to contact one of his friends to get you a job. And what you have in all these different scenarios is that whenever you're hungry for something, you go to someone who has a fish. Okay? And they give you the fish. And you bake the fish and you eat and the hunger goes away. But you don't really know how to fish. You don't know where to go to get the fishing pole. You don't know what the baits look like. You don't really know what rivers or pools of water you should visit. Okay? You don't really know if you have the patience to stand there for hours so that, you could catch a megalodon. Okay? Most of who and what you are is basically what you have gotten from other people. Okay? So whatever information you accumulate in life, whatever piece of advice other people give you, this is like fish given to you from the outside. there comes a point where you'll find yourself hungry again. Okay? Now, if you are lucky, you'll find someone who says, you know what, instead of me giving you a fish, let me teach you how to fish. They'll take you to Target, depending on your size, your height, your weight, your age, whether you're a novice or you have some proficiency, they'll buy you a relatively decent fishing pole, they'll get you some baits, okay? Then they take you to the right river, where instead of waiting for like weeks to catch a tiny little red fish, okay, it only takes like an hour. Okay? And then every time you say, this is useless, ridiculous, let's go home, they kind of smack you on the head, they say, wait. And then you realize that your fishing pole is just wiggling. And then they'll teach you how to pull the string, okay, little by little. And then you'll catch the fish. But you go in there without an ice box. You put the fish in your pocket, or whatever. And so there are lots of training. And then after a while, you realize that, wow, you've done this, fishing stuff for like 2, 3, 4, 5 months. Now you're addicted to this guy. So you go in the morning, knock on his door and say, let's go fishing, but he's not there. You open the door, he's dead. But you're hungry. So you know what you do? You just pack up your stuff. You walk to the river on your own by yourself. And you sit there patiently. And you catch 2, 3, 4, 5 fish. You come home, you give one to your mom, one to your dad, one to Matthew for his beautiful haircut. And you cook one for yourself. Now that you know how to fish, the only way that this knowledge can be removed from you is dementia. If the river runs dry, if the fish begin to migrate, but that knowledge of how to fish will never leave you. Right now, nothing belongs to you. You're just a collection of other people's experiences, whether it's your religion, whether it's your girlfriend, boyfriend, it doesn't really matter. All the passions, desire that live inside you, you don't own anything. Nothing. You're really poor. Hold on. Anyone else? Abi.
What does it mean to have freedom?
So last week, Thursday, after this class, I went home and I wrote, for the first time in many years, my wife and kids were not there. See? Many blessings come in disguise, And so I said, this is beautiful. And then I got a message from the gods above, my wife. We won't be home tonight. Don't be sad. She said, sad? Are you kidding? I turned on Alexis. Is it Alexa or Alexa? Alexa, that thing? Yeah, Siri. So I put on some dancing music, It was a moment to celebrate. I took off my clothes and I danced naked in the house. No wife, no kids, at last freedom. I know, it's awful. And so, I made myself some food. I went downstairs to the shed I had built. It's like my oasis. I went there and I wrote, like for 5 hours, on death. And then as I was coming up, I realized I'm not feeling too well. I said, maybe it's because I just was looking at the monitor for too long or whatever. But around 11 p.m., I began to throw up. Again and again and again and again, like 50 times. And then my stomach began to hurt. At first, I thought it was my chest, and I'm like dying. I said, thank God. But no. So a couple of things. I'm going to respond to your very, 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 very complex question through my good friend Abraham Maslow, a wonderful psychologist from New York, a Jewish philosopher, really, that despite all of his research in psychology, he was never able to make peace with his mom. And you would think that as a psychologist, you're your own therapist, that whatever wrong your mom has committed against you, you're able to forgive her, because that's what therapists do. You kind of scrub yourself clean of all the negative emotions. But no, just because you're you teach philosophy, doesn't mean you're a philosopher. And even if you're a philosopher, it doesn't mean that you can be a philosopher for every branch of life. So he has this thing called the hierarchy of needs, that there are stages to our development. And if you want to take calculus, you need algebra. If you need to know algebra, if you want to do algebra well, you need to know your timetables well, And so, at the very basic level, what you and I need is food, shelter, and clothing. Now, why is that important? Because when we first landed down here, we kind of just dropped from nowhere naked. No Safeways, no Costco's, no wheel was invented, no animal was domesticated, no shelter was built. Imagine that your brain space is held hostage from the moment you wake up to the time to go to bed. Am I going to be hungry tonight? The weather is really, really cold. Is there something I can cover my skin with? There are all these vicious animals out there. Is there a place I can go hide, not to be devoured by, Godzilla, King Kong? That's your brain space. You don't have the freedom to think about anything else. You don't sit and say, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on my soul. None of those things exist. Your brain, your mind, your life is held hostage by food, shelter, and clothing. Something amazing happens. At a certain point in our evolution, we are able to kind of figure out how the seasons work. At what point throughout the year something grows from the earth, something bears fruit. Okay, that becomes agriculture. And wherever food grows, well, you're going to be stationed there. It's like when you're single, you're a nomad. You date a lot of people. The moment you find a match, that becomes your permanent residence. Okay? You make your home in that person. And that's what happened to us. You know how the seasons work? Now you have permanent settlement. And for the first time, you do something really interesting. You see the same faces day after day after day after day. Now you have the birth of friendship. With some people, you get along really, really well. Now you have intimate friendships. Okay? Now you begin to share your secrets with those intimate friendships. And with intimacy, now you grow attached. When they pass, now you grieve. I mean, these are things we never experienced before. Do you see? See, you won't care if I die, but should your husband falls ill and dies, now you begin to grieve. Okay? So just in case some of you are wondering about compassion and generosity and those emotions that plague us once in a while, it took a long, long time. Because initially you're just there for yourself. As your friendship and intimacy grows, now you realize you're willing to sacrifice your own goods, including your time, your youth, your life, for another. Okay? Now you realize something really interesting. You're able to build shelter. and you have closets filled with food, and you have friendships, and you have a community of people. What you now have is you no longer think about food because it's right there. It's like the fridge you have in your house. You no longer think about shelter because it's right there. You've paid for your house. You've paid for the end month rent. Okay. Clothing. You go to Amazon, you open your closet and it's there. That means what exactly? That means now your brain space, your mind. If initially 100% it was occupied with food, shelter, and clothing, it no longer is. Now you can sit. Now what you have is something that most of us never had. You have idle time. You have time that has nothing in it. It means that there's nothing to pursue. Now for the first time what you have is boredom. What the hell do you do with boredom? Because boredom takes away meaning from your life. It makes everything you have meaningless. For those of you in this class who are bored of your companion, you want to break up, there's a reason. You have the privilege of having, another privilege of being saturated, another privilege of being bored. And in boredom, now you have poverty. In poverty, now you have the freedom. What do I do? Where do I go? Okay? Now, it's not enough for you to have food, shelter, and clothing, because you could end up like me on Thursday. Your physical body is going through so much pain that you don't have the brain space, the privilege to think, to call your friends, to read ridiculous essays your students wrote, to give them passing grades even though they don't deserve. You don't have that privilege. So before you can move up the ladder, you need to make sure that first, again, remember food, shelter, and clothing. Second, food. Your body is healthy enough to chew the food, push it in, and you trust that you have relatively healthy digestive system where the body keeps what it needs, gets rid of what it doesn't. Okay. The next thing is shelter. What's the use of going home? You have a nice little tiny little apartment, beautiful. Your fridge is full. You look around. Kasara comes to class holding Matthew's hand. She keeps looking at him saying, I love your haircut. And she puts her fingers through his hair and she, oh my gosh, beautiful. And you know what's going to happen to you, Abi? You're going to say, I want some of that. Envy, jealousy. You're not going to sit and say, I want to get to know myself. What is philosophy? What is God? Am I a sinner? No. Your brain space is no longer occupied with food, shelter, and clothing. It's occupied with, I want a companion. You're still being held hostage. Then you realize shelter is good. By yourself, it's miserable. You need freedom from loneliness, so you get married. But before you actually get to a place of having a companion in your house, you have your primary companions, parents. Your parents gave you shelter. But did you feel comfortable in their care? Were they there? Did you experience faith, trust, love, discipline? Because these are your first caretakers. And this is your formative years. Because if those emotions that you need so desperately for a healthy life thereafter, after you leave a parent's house, if you don't have those, okay, in a healthy way inside you, you're going to be held hostage by them until the day you die, until you're able to resolve them. Okay? So even having shelter by itself is not sufficient. You need love and care in it. You need to know that every time life beats you up, you can pick up the phone and say, Mom, I just want a mom right now. And your mom says, honey, I'm 90, you're 70, can't you take care of yourself? And you say, Mom, I really am an infant, I need you. You need to have that, or your dad. Okay? So remember, things on their own and by themselves are not sufficient. There is another thing that your family gives you. Your family gives you support. You make a mistake, they say it's okay. You make a mistake, you don't listen, they punish you. It's called discipline. And it takes time for you to understand that you're disciplined not because they're angry with you, but because they love you. That takes a while. And you will do whatever you possibly can to please your parents. Take a look at my drawing. Your meaning comes from your parents' approval. And should your parents always reject your creation, man, you're going to be disabled for the rest of your life. There are parts of you that will never grow. And you know what will happen to you? You will get married, but you will always please your husband, even if he's wrong. You will live a life that's always in the service of other people. You will have never any autonomy, individuality, creativity. Why? Because you desperately need other people's approval. Because there comes a point where your parents say, honey, do it on your own. Shower on your own. Dress on your own. Do things on your own. And for the first time, what you realize is the only approval that's meaningful and valuable is your own. And you get that from your parents. But then you move to a different stage in life, which is, I want to go out there and just make friends. People in this room. I'm tired of getting approved by my parents, confirmed by my parents. I want her to like me. But because you've been socialized well, and one of the nice things about having siblings is that for the first 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 years, you guys wrestle. You fight. He took my toy. She took my toy. He hit me. She kicked me. And somehow you have to compromise. You have to make peace. And if you're an only child, you're just selfish. You're just not a very nice kid. You're pampered. So whenever you get into friendships, it's always your way or the highway. And eventually you just become undigestible for the people outside. Okay? So having siblings and having parents around with whom you have to wrestle to get things done, it gets you ready for society, because that's what society does. You can't come to this class and like me. You wrestle. You have to wrestle with the assignments you don't like. You have to wrestle with the grade that you don't like. And you have to sit there quietly, respectfully, and listen to the things I say and not liking. It's okay. Okay. There comes a point where you say, I don't want to get money from my parents. I want a job. Now you make your own money. Now you understand what power is, what privilege is. And maybe one day you'll go home realizing that your job sucks. You say, oh, well, I have this book on Karl Marx. Maybe I should read him. He talks a lot about being exploited. Denzel Washington some years ago made a movie called Man on Fire. And as you read Das Kapital, which is a work that took Marx 20 years, you realize that you're on fire now. You have this rage about you. You're tired of society exploiting you, your boss exploiting you, life exploiting you. So remember, as you move up, you need freedom. You need space, empty space. Then something really wonderful happens. Your body is healthy. Your mortgage is paid off. Your husband is there. Your kids are there. You have a job. You have money. You have a select, healthy group of friends. One day, like Matthew, you wake up. You look yourself in the mirror. And you say, I don't like my life. Privilege allows you to look at your life. Being pain-free allows you to look at your life and say, it's no good. And for the first time you realize what Socrates said, an unexamined life is not worth living. You can't examine your life if you have a stomachache, if you're aching for a relationship, if you're aching to figure out what school your kids are going to, if you're aching to resolve issues with your husband, if you're aching to find a job, if you're aching to have money. You need a lot of freedom to be able to think about life, to examine life. And the problem with examination is you realize that as you examine it more closely and more rigorously, you become the prince of death. Whatever you touch, whether physically, intellectually, emotionally, it begins to die, wither, and decay, and is scattered in the wind. And now your desert life begins. And you walk into the desert for one simple reason. You don't care about your body, not because you're sick. You no longer want to go to an Indian store, spend $100 on chicken tikka masala, mixed vegetables, garlic naan, dosa, samosa. You say, you know what? Bread is fine. Let's do it the way Marx did. Bread and potatoes are fine. Say, you know what? I have a house. It's just no longer a home. Whether I lay down on a bus bench or a shelter like this, they're both the same to me. I have a marriage, but I feel alone. And as you gain more autonomy, more independence given to you by your privilege, you get more freedom. That freedom allows you to examine your life very, very closely. Now you've come to the last point, which is self-knowledge. And the problem with self-knowledge is that you're looking for a self that's not connected to your physical body. You're looking for a self that's not attached to a house, not attached to a kid, not attached to a husband or a wife, not attached to a past, not attached to society, not attached to money. You have no idea what you're looking for. All you know is that you have the freedom and the privilege to be in this desert and to be running around like a rat looking for something you don't know. So you become profoundly selfish. And at this stage, you have no shame about you, no guilt. Your wife is not able to make you feel guilty because you want to leave her. You don't care for your kids. You're looking for something and they can't give it to you. And then your search comes to an end. Maybe like Moses, you have found the promised land. You're no longer held hostage by your quest or by your passion to examine, to find. You have found. But now you're held hostage by a different thing. Like Marx, you go around, you look at the factories and you look at the people who work in the factories and you say, really? Are you telling me that what Florida is doing? Are you telling me that we're going to have kids as young as 6 going into factories, working from 4 in the morning until 11 at night? And you realize all of a sudden that your freedom, you're going to use it no longer for yourself. You're going to use it to benefit other people. Now you have a prophet who lived a life of privilege, whose privilege allowed him the freedom to think, whose thinking gave him the privilege to examine, whose examination gave him the privilege to revolt against any system that would oppress the human being. But there was something that Karl Marx, many of us in this class, can't really be free of. His wife had cancer, Jenny. She died. His daughter, Jenny, died a few months later. And then Marx realized that, yes, he has the privilege to think, but the grief of having lost his wife, having lost his daughter, too much. He was held hostage. He died. I'll tell you another kind of freedom, and I only say it because of the message you sent me. Nothing wrong with that. In the Gospel of Judas, something really interesting happens. Jesus wants his disciples to be as crazy as he is. But he goes home. This is again in the Gospel of Judas. What time is it?
It is 10:38.
What time are we done?
9:45.
Why is time moving so slow?
Well, either you're bored or you're having fun. One of the two.
That's very good.
Time
So-
flies when you're having fun. Time slows down when you're having bored. When you're bored.
So there's that. Anyone else?
What is simplicity?
Simplicity.
Other than what the dictionary says.
The dictionary.
Like something else.
Of course it is. So Jamila, here it is. You ready? You sure? You're not, but I'll give it to you nevertheless. Jamila, how old are you? A woman should never disclose her age. But you're a brave and mature woman, so you're beyond that. Now, do you remember when you were born? I'll tell it to you, because I was there. Your poor mom. She pushes and pushes and pushes and pushes until you come out. You don't care if you're black or white or yellow or blue. You don't care if you're a man or a woman or in between. You don't care if you're in America or India. No. You don't care if you have clothes on. No. You don't care if someone is spreading your legs open. No. Innocence. It comes when you're born. It's a free gift. All kids have it. But as you age, you're no longer as simple. Your mom takes you to the church and you're baptized. Baptized. You gotta have fun, you know? This stuff is serious. You know. And then they send you to school. You goof around. The teacher looks at you. Scares the crap out of you. Then your teacher calls home, talks to your mom. You go home, your mom slaps you. You realize that your neighbors' kids, they have bikes, but you don't. They have companions, you don't. They have a house, you don't. They have clothes, you don't. They have designer clothes, you don't. They have education, you don't. They have whatever. Envy, jealousy. And you get clothed. You know, you have a shirt that's envy, you have a shirt that's jealousy, you have another shirt that's anger. You have all these different outfits with different desires. You're no longer naked. You're no longer innocent. You're like a vulturous animal now, like any other rat in society, running around to figure out how you can get what you want. And once in a while, there is pain. And then you say, is there a way I can get rid of this pain? And then you have memories, and then you have a past that you try to deal with. And you have an uncertain future, you try to kind of figure out how to get there. There is nothing simple about you. You're as complicated as a computer, with all these chips in it. There are these tiny moments in life where maybe you're just walking around the lake, the sun is setting, and it's mostly a mood swing where you sit at the impact of the sun, the impact of the twilight, the impact of just the water. It's like something about you, the delete button gets pushed and everything about you goes away. You're not a black woman or a white or a brown or a this or a that. You're not a man or a woman. You don't have a past or a future. You just sit there and you look at the sunset and you say, you know what? Life is good. God exists. People are good. You become simple. But that's not something that you have worked towards. It just happens to you. It's accidental. That simplicity. There are some people who say, you know what? I hate what life has done to me. I mean, consider the story of Malcolm X, a black man who loses everything, ends up in prison. He has a past, he has a future. He's in a place he doesn't like to be. He's surrounded by people he doesn't like. There is no simplicity to him. This is a man who knows what his past is, who knows his history. Okay? Another man needs to walk into his life. He needs to find a way to delete everything Malcolm X thinks about, feels about, has memory of. He needs to make him simple. And when he's made simple, then he can learn new things. Then for the first time, he's able to have trust and faith and love in a man he's never seen, never known. And he's able to become a sacrificial lamb to Elijah Muhammad. But you see, something amazing happens to Malcolm. He doesn't want power. I mean, talk about being simple. This is a man who quests after power. He wants to understand. He likes freedom. He likes equality. He likes fairness. He knows what it means to be a thug. He doesn't want anyone being a thug. He doesn't want anyone to be demonized by society. He wants to cleanse a society. He's like John the Baptist, not for an individual human being, but for society itself. He just wants to baptize the political system, people's perspective. And so once he comes to realize that Elijah Muhammad is making him complicated, not so simple, not so innocent, he walks away. But he walks away still being contaminated. He sees color still until he visits Saudi Arabia. And there he sees the black and the white and the brown and the yellow and the blue sitting together, praying together. No one cares about color. And then he goes to the Hajj around the Kaaba and comes to realize it doesn't matter if you're Donald Trump or Obama or Snoop Dogg or someone who just got out of prison. All you wear is this thin white fabric around you. No one knows who you are. No one cares who you are. Everybody's equal before God, before truth, before simplicity. But that kind of simplicity that takes cultivation, about a 20-year process. But if you're passionate, well, it's good to see all of you. Thank you for wasting my time again.
We're not that bad, are we?
Yeah, you are. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.